Welcome to the Chasing Poker Greatness channel. Today's video is episode 5 in the Strategy Combine series, where Coach Brad and myself break down hands from the notes that have the highest impact on your overall win rate. If you're interested in learning more about the Strategy Combine, make sure to stick around for the break. But first, here's Tactical Tuesday.
Welcome, my friends, to another episode of Tactical Tuesday. As always, this is Coach Brad, the founder of ChasingPokerGreatness.com, and I'm joined by my co-host, Mr. Jonathan Chai. How are you, sir? What are we doing today? What are we talking about?
We're still in 3-bet pots in position as a pre-flop caller. Today, instead of value, though, we're going to be talking about how to play your bluff catchers in this spot. I'm going to do a little, intro to these two hands before we get started here. So I think in both of these hands, the Wolves that played them demonstrated a really good level of awareness about like the value of their bluff catcher, right? And they did a really good job of having, kind of dialing in like how much value their bluff catcher has, and then taking what I think is the appropriate action after assessing the kind of the amount of equity or the amount of value that their bluff catcher has. So yeah, these two hands, they're going to be played differently, but still, I think show off the same skill.
Cool. So let's dive in and talk more about it as the situations develop. So hand number one, Hero has pocket fives, opens the cutoff, the small blind 3-bets. We're playing 1K and L and start with 100 big blinds. So everything's very normal, and Hero defends with its 2 5s and not the best of flops, but not the worst of flops. 7, 4, 3, 2 diamonds. So Hero flops pair plus a gut shot, and the small blind starts out with half pot. And yeah, we're already at a decision point.
Not too much of a decision point for me here. I think I'm just going to be calling with my pocket fives, and I assume the decision you were talking about was this decision between call and raise, and you're never considering folding here.
I mean, if you're going to call a 3-bet with pocket fives, flop, a pair, and a gut shot, you probably need to rethink your decision to peel with pocket fives, because this is probably like a top, it's like top 20% type flop for pocket fives.
Did you have an argument for raising that you wanted to make?
Not really. I mean, you could make one. I think you could develop an argument for raising. I think actually you could probably raise and get it in if we really wanted to go down that rabbit hole against the villain's going to have some actual just flush draws with overcards that we're doing quite well against. We can deny equity versus all their like overcards and backdoor hearts. We can make sure that we don't get bluffed on future nodes. So I think there's like some merit to raising the flop and then kind of deciding what to do after we raise. But I think calling is much more standard and normal. So
that's what our that's here.
We call, turns a 7 of hearts. So 3, 4, 7, 7, 2 diamonds, 2 hearts. This doesn't really change a ton. I think that the Hero is going to have some 6, 7 and 7, 8, but also going to have a lot of, pairs like we have. The out of position player does make the decision to go ahead and check though. So yeah, now I think we have we have a decision. We can either check behind to try to check down at river, or we can, block in the same way that we blocked last week with our king queen on the turn when we had trips. This time we've got a hand that doesn't want to be bluffed, wants to realize equity, and I don't think we're going to get check raised a ton, and if we did get check raised, we probably just call all in. I think villain can check raise with a bunch of different flush draws, so not much downside, I don't think, in just betting like a third here on the turn.
Yeah, so you're on team block the turn again with pocket fives the same way we did with king queen last week.
Correct. Yeah. Okay. Hero check
we'll
behind.
Not take that option this time. They decided to check back. Maybe
sure.
A little too concerned about getting their equity denied by a check jam on the turn or something similar.
Oh, there's an easy solution to that. You just pound the call button when they jam, and you never get your equity denied, right? That's the cure-all. So Hero checks back. I think checking back is also reasonable too, right? Like you're gonna check back the turn, and then villain's gonna check the river, and you're gonna check behind and just beat a lot of their like king queens, queen jacks type hands. It's also probably a little bit easier to call the river once the turn checks through. So yeah, I think there's a lot of merit in, betting the turn. I think there's merit in checking the turn, and either one I'm kind of on board with. It's just more of my personal preference. River's at 8 of clubs, and the out of position villain checks. And so now the hero has a decision as to, should they value bet or should they not value bet?
Yeah. And also I think a question as to if you're going to value bet, what size, like what types of hands are you trying to value bet versus what type of range do you expect the small blind to bluff catch with that actually loses to pocket fives on the river?
Yeah, I would value bet all in, I think, and just go for max value. I think I'm pretty skeptical that the villain does a good enough job of checking their overpairs twice. I think they have so many targets on the turn with like jacks and queens and kings and aces that they can blast turn and jam river. And then once the turn checks through, they can also just rip the river too for value with like aces, kings, queens. So I think that they have like pretty big reduction in their top end value, which means that they're left with, probably a lot of like ace, king, ace, queen type hands that can be skeptical when we jam the river after checking the turn. Because when they bet a third on the flop, we have a lot of like backdoor hearts. We have a lot of maybe diamonds and maybe just like overcards, right? Like, Jack 10 of spades or something like that we call the flop with that we can bluff with on the river. So I actually think that we can just go all in here. That would be...
Let's start out with half on the flop.
Oh, they did start out with half?
Yeah.
Okay, so we have backdoor hearts. We got some backdoor hearts we could rep. Maybe not the queen jack of clubs, but I think big would be my size personally.
I would also jam here with pocket fives, and I think that might seem a little shocking to some of the viewers that like we expect to get called by ace king, ace queen, maybe not even. Maybe they don't even need ace high to call the spot because we probably wouldn't be bluffing our, necessarily turning our ace highs into bluffs. But yeah, I think this is really a really good spot for kind of another like uncomfortably thin value bet to echo some of our comments in last week's episode with pocket fives. And yeah, just target that ace high region that I think is going to talk itself into a call sometimes, because when we call half pot on the flop, we're going to have a lot of flush draws. We're going to have a lot of backdoor flush draws, and it's reasonable for us to check, some or all of them back on the turn because we just don't want to face check jam. When we get to this bricky kind of 8 of clubs river, we are going to have quite a few just unpaired 2 diamond, 2 heart type hands in our range. So that's why I think Brad and I wouldn't be shocked to get bluff caught here by a hand like ace king.
And I think this is kind of representative of a shift that, we've kind of had over time as it relates to running the Wolves program. Is like, there's a big component of poker is being able to hand read and think critically and logically throughout the hand so that you can make better decisions here. To say that, overbet ripping the river at a 3-bet pot as the in position preflop caller with third pair is going to be like some sort of standard or hard strategy. It just can't be a hard strategy, right? The way that you realize that this is a value is by thinking about your opponent's range, thinking about the opponent, the actions that they've taken, and then making a decision based on all the available in-game information that you have access to. That's very specific to this spot. And this is like, prime reason why we've kind of shifted as a group a while back to giving our players and allowing them to have the flexibility and thought process and critical thinking so that they can arrive at these types of situations, analyze it correctly, and then go for max value. I don't know the result. Our hero actually bets a third, which, makes me a little bit sad.
They realized that their hand was a value bet, but weren't as confident as we were that they would call ace high.
Yeah. So
thought they needed the size down to target their range.
And again, like in review of this hand, we can give them feedback as like, oh no, I think actually they just call with ace king when you jam. So I think you can just put the money in. So they call with ace queen, hero wins with pocket fives. I think one other problem with going this size that is important to mention before we move on to hand number 2 is that like if villain does have a slow play, like a trap, which they will have some traps, right? We're not saying they never have like kings or aces when they take this line. We're just saying they probably don't have enough of them. When they have kings here, they are going to just jam and make our lives miserable. They get to just like jam all their overpairs facing this size, and that really puts us in a pretty big bind when we thin value like a third here. So yeah, just to kind of like make it to where I never get bluffed and never really have to face the decision after betting a third on the river. I think that's just another good reason to just put the money in yourself.
Yeah. So good recognition about the value of the pocket fives, but just didn't go as far as we would have liked them to.
Yeah, and we get comments on YouTube talking about sizes and like, we said that a few weeks ago talking about a 4-bet size being bigger, being big, and it was like 2 big blinds more than kind of the top end of our range. It was like 27 big blinds versus like 25 big blinds or something like that. And it's just really important to bear in mind that like these details as far as like precision with sizing, they really, really matter. It seems nitpicky, but when you're trying to play poker at the highest of levels, at the highest of stakes, you can't be lackadaisical about these fine details in the decisions that you make. They fucking matter. And like, I'm paying attention to them, and I'm part of the pool that you're playing against. And the highest level players that I know, they're paying attention to them, and they're part of the pool you're playing against. Like, this is a competition. You're competing against players. None of this is slipping under the radar for them. And so like, if you're not seeing it, you're giving up an edge to your opponents, right? You don't have to be super precise every single time. That's not what I'm saying, but I'm saying you've got to think about the size you're choosing here and whether it makes sense, whether it's too big, whether it's too small. That just has to be a primary driver before you bet, is like, what size am I going to use here? And if you're just kind of like, I don't know what to do, and you just bet half pot, that's just nowhere near good enough.
As promised in the intro, here's a closer look at the CPG Strategy Combine. The Strategy Combine is a database analysis tool that will allow you to analyze your game like a professional, identify where you're crushing and where your game needs work, compare yourself at every major node to the best players in the CPG Wolves CFP, see how you stack up versus the top players on our high-stakes team, create an improvement plan based on the specific nodes that most urgently need your attention. Focus your time and energy on the spots that matter the most. Go to chasingpokergreatness.com/CPG Strategy Combine to read testimonials from the beta group, as well as register yourself for the next Combine. I hope to see you there. Now, back to Tactical Tuesday.
So here, hand number 2, we got pocket fours. We open the button to $50. We're playing 2K and L. The small blind 3-bets us, and we call in position. Flop is king, queen, 8 with 2 spades. We do not have the 4 of spades. The small blind checks, and now actions on hero with pocket fours. I presume we check behind. Could potentially.
Yeah, we don't start doing anything crazy just yet.
Yeah, I could imagine like starting out a 3-street bluff here with pocket fours, because there's going to be probably some fairly juicy runouts, and it's quite unlikely that we realize our equity by checking down. So we check. Turn is the 3 of spades. I guess hero just checks behind again now. Be weird to start bluffing after we check back the flop. We do beat ace jack. We beat ace 10. We beat ace 5 suited. Those types of hands. River is a 6 of hearts. And the small blind checks again. So, yeah, what's the... Give me the breakdown here, John, because I think this looks pretty obvious that checking behind is like a very reasonable option.
I don't think it's that obvious. I don't think checking behind on the river is that obvious. I like checking back on the flop, and I like checking back on the turn. But I think once we get to the river, like, you're probably right that some of the time we do beat hands like ace jack and ace 10 that have a little bit of showdown value with their no pairness on the flop, turn, and river. But I would also expect a lot of ace jacks and ace 10s and those types of draws to start bluffing on the flop, like start out with a c-bet on the flop and maybe delay c-bet the turn if they don't start out with a c-bet on the flop. So I'm a little suspicious here that the small blind's check down range is a little bit too showdown heavy. And maybe so much so that pocket fours does better by just bluffing this spot. I think when the small blind does decide to check down like the showdown heavy range, it's almost all hands that are better than pocket fours. Maybe there's a little bit of like ace three suited that somehow gets in there on this board texture, but that's about it that I see. So
I would say
I would be
not all. I would say that we're going to check behind and win like 10 to 15% of the time, I would think, which is, five winning. We check back, we win 5 to 7.5 big blinds. Maybe we win 20% of the time. So 10 big blinds. And so like bluffing has to outperform that essentially. Yeah. So like the targets that you're choosing going to be jacks, 10s, 9s.
And jacks, 10s, 9s, 7s,
7-8 suited if they 3-bet some of the suited connectors, 8.
Yeah, some sort of 8 suited. And, I guess that would definitely be the bulk of their the bulk of the target range when you're bluffing here. I'm a little bit biased because I know what the small blind folded. But yeah, I think this is like a spot where to me it doesn't seem as slam dunk of a check back as you seem to think it was as soon as we got here.
So what size then? Like we're targeting, third pairs in general. I think probably like half to 75%. If you wanted to target like ace queen, you probably have to go bigger than that.
Yeah, I really like the size that the wolf decided to go here. And I think he just went massive and something close to pot, maybe actually went a little bit bigger than pot. Yeah. And I think this is like the region that you need to be in. Like 75% to overbet is, I think, the right range when you're targeting hands that are better than pocket fours, because at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is fold out pocket pairs. And so I don't think that we can go some small or middling size in the spot and expect to get a ton of folds from the region that we're trying to fold out.
We're gonna fold out the hands that we would otherwise beat if we just check behind, essentially.
Right, exactly. And so now I like the size because I think we do need a little extra juice in our river bluff size here in order to fold out those one pairs that are better than pocket fours.
Yeah, if you're gonna bet, I guess this is the size, and you spoiled it by saying villain folds. So let's see what villain does fold queen 10. So I mean, I think that actually it's not super surprising. I would say that as you scale up and use the overbet size as opposed to like 75%, this is the next tier of hand that you would be targeting, would be like the second pairs. I think 75 probably targets jacks, 10s, 9s pretty successfully, and then overbet is moving to the next tier of like queen X. Can we fold out ace queen, queen jack, queen 10 type hands? So yeah, not exactly surprising that they fold out a queen here. I would say that if they do fold out a queen here using the size, that makes the size really, 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 really good, because if they're folding a queen, they're only calling with a king. They bet a lot of their kings at some earlier decision point, which means that, we're realizing a ton of fold equity here, way more than, the 55% or whatever it is that we need to be able to profitably place this bet. So yeah, this bet is printing and good for hero folding out queen X. I would be a little afraid that I'm not going to fold out queen X, but yeah, good for hero here.
Gotta try. Oh, yeah. So in summary, I think like hand number one, hero flops a bluff catcher after calling a 3-bet in position and gets to the river, realizes that their bluff catcher actually has enough value to value bet the river. Obviously, we can debate the size. And in this spot, kind of in a very similar situation, hero peels pre-flop, has a bluff catcher in pocket fours, and gets to the river and accurately assesses the situation and realizes, hey, this bluff catcher actually does not have enough value to maybe even check back the river, so I'm going to turn this bluff catcher into a bluff. And I think that's really good awareness of
it always has enough value to check back. Like, it's no matter what, checking back has to be plus EV.
Maybe checking back can be outperformed by bluffing.
Yeah, that's a more precise way to say it.
Yeah. In any case, I think both wolves did a really good job of assessing the value of their bluff catcher and two situations where I think I could have easily seen it going differently with maybe the pocket fives just checking back the river, and maybe the pocket fours here just trying to check it down and losing to queen 9.
Very nice. Great hands. Great episode. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Ask your questions if you have any questions about this node. And that's all I have for this week's episode of Tactical Tuesday.
See you next week.
See you next week.
This is Tactical Tuesday on Chasing Poker Greatness with your hosts, Brad Wilson and John Chai. Coach Brad approved. Are you a lone wolf searching for the ultimate pack? The CPG Wolf program is a close-knit brotherhood hell-bent on one thing only: chasing poker greatness. Powered by bleeding-edge wolf strats and led by Coach Brad and his lieutenants, CPG Wolves are systematically prepared for almost any spot they'll encounter on the green felt. If you want to plug into an elite team and have a step-by-step game plan to realize your full poker potential, you can apply at cpgwolves.com. Space is limited, and the pack is only as strong as its weakest member. So only the hungriest, grittiest, and most driven will be accepted into the program. Applications are open at cpgwolves.com.